Hey everyone, welcome to another recording event for the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Making sure that everything is, I believe we're live everywhere this time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Joining the broadcast team tonight, John Richardson of Only Guns and Money, Rob Morris, the Slowfax blog, and Charlie Cook of Riding Shotgun with Charlie. I didn't even have to make any changes today, guys. It was the same team last week. So, yeah, I can see we are live. We are officially live on YouTube. So I'm going to go ahead and get social media hooked up, and we'll be ready to fly.
The counter's still on.
Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about.
There we go.
Okay, and I want to remind everybody as we get started, if you'd like to comment on anything we're talking about, go to either the YouTube or Facebook page for Polite Society Podcast. If you're catching us on anywhere else on Facebook or in a Facebook group or on another YouTube page, go to the Polite Society Podcast page to comment, or go to Twitter and tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet. And by the way, we're live on Twitter too. So that'll be real easy for you, those of you who are watching on Twitter. So, and then do not tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet for this show. It's PS Podcast. So, and we're getting comments coming in on YouTube, so everything is good there. I believe, guys, on my end, I'm ready to fly. Are we ready to go forward with the show?
Yes.
All right.
Let's do it.
Here we go then. Masad Ayub in 5, 4, 3.
Hey gang, this is Masad Ayub from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. And I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Hi, and welcome to the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society Podcast. We're recording this one on Monday, December the 19th, 2022. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Rob Morse, and on tonight's show we'll talk about Florida flirting with permitless carry again.
I'm John Richardson,
Nice.
and we will talk about a typical week in Lori Lightfoot's Chicago.
I'm Charlie Cook, and we'll talk about a man who has a run-in with his father-in-law and becomes an outlaw. So climb aboard.
Strap in.
And hang on.
Episode 644 of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society Podcast starts right now. All right, it's Monday night at 6 p.m. in the Central Time Zone, which means, of course, it's the only time zone that matters, and it means it's time for another Polite Society podcast. Rob, you got all your shopping done for Christmas?
All I really needed was you, Paul.
I'm not for sale.
I was on Bill Frady's Lock and Load radio show. I recorded another episode of Self-Defense Gun Stories. I carry it every day, which gets easier. You know, actually, we do change clothes in the South with the seasons. John, how about you?
Well, we took a long weekend trip in Kentucky to attend a surprise retirement party for my brother-in-law, not mother-in-law. I did carry up and back. Larry was forced into retirement this past week as he turned 65, and the FAA thinks that it's too old to be an airline pilot. They consider age, not health nor experience, as the key. In other news, I got to help with endurance testing of a pistol that will be introduced to the market very shortly. Charlie, seems you've been busy.
Yes, I have had a busy 2A media week. The Loaded Mics with Dan Wass and John Petrolino came out this week. Dan chopped it into 2 different episodes. And the episode of Sister in Arms that I did with the DC Project Gals here in Massachusetts and Rhode Island also came out. And I had a class with a father and son this weekend who were referred to me by the father's father. So I brought 3 generations of new gun owners into the fold, which I think is kind of cool.
Very much so.
Yeah. So, Paul, what's been happening with you and the bullets?
Well, it's been... I've had a few days. I've upgraded the distribution for the digital distribution for the Bullet and for Polite Society and for Amanda's Eye on the Target Radio. And everything I do is I've updated the distribution for. And it's a different process for going live. And so yesterday on Amanda's Eye on the Target Radio, it was going great on Facebook for 30 minutes. It was going great everywhere else for 30 minutes, but YouTube didn't show up. And today it was 18 minutes. The Bullet was going fantastically everywhere but YouTube. And I made darn sure that tonight's Polite Society kicked off like it should. So, and for my week, I mean, it's just been... I mentioned on the show last week, I'm not doing SHOT Show this week. Instead, I'm going down to the U.S. Virgin Islands in February, and planning for that is well underway, including, I found out today that even though it's covered by the U.S. Constitution, the carry laws, Hawaii has fantastically wonderful carry laws compared to the U.S. Virgin Islands. So does New York. So does New Jersey.
I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So,
welcome to the Commonwealth.
Yeah. But so when I go down in February, I will not be bringing a firearm with me. But such is life. It's a bucket list thing for me. This is something I've wanted to do for a few years now. Finally am able to do it, and if I've got to be disarmed for a week, I've got to be disarmed for a week. So
let me ask you this. Do you have to go without a gun, or do you have to go disarmed?
Well, good choice of words there. I have to be without a gun.
Okay.
So
you could bring other devices.
So you could use a broken rum bottle.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, they already have those down there, right?
Well, or pre-broken. There you go. They're pre-broken rum bottles.
It's a make your own broken rum bottle, a DIY.
Yes, absolutely.
An 80 proofer.
You know, there was a discussion on Amanda's Eye on the Target radio show yesterday in the YouTube comments. Once I finally got YouTube up, in the YouTube comments section, there was a discussion about Mogen David wine, and yeah. Anyway,
he shall sell no wine before it's time.
No, Mogen David didn't wait. Mogen David, it just got mixed. Okay, that's good enough. Ship it. Anyway, let's go ahead and let's get off to our first commercial break. We got news to talk about, so we're going to head off to break. We're going to hear from ACLDN, and we'll be right back right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership, and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Massad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Givens, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tuller, and led by network president Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
All right, before we get into news, and by the way, in case you haven't figured it out, there is no guest tonight. Before we get into news, I got a couple of comments I've got to get in very fast. John says, Merry Christmas on... Whoops. Why did that not... Try that again. Aha, that's why. John says Merry Christmas on Facebook, and I need to change this to this, and then he'll say Mount Gay is a local rum on that island, and I think that's incredibly important information. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I misspoke. It's not Mogan David. It was Paul Masson.
Yes.
Paul Mason. Mm-hmm. Paul Masson sells no wine before it's taught. Because I'm like, Mogan David, that's not right. That's not right.
Yeah, Mogan David was. I mean, you've heard the term rot gut. That's where it came from. It's high quality is not their thing.
They made the grapes by stepping on them, and it tastes like it. Is that their
yes? Phrase? And to heck with the athlete's foot. We're not going to bother with that. So, all right, let's get started with news. And I don't even know where my show notes are. There we go. Let's kick it off with Florida. Florida. This is off. I picked this up off of AmmoLand.com. DeSantis is, I'm going to call flirting. Governor Ron DeSantis is once again showing Florida's previous governors what it takes to be a leader. Yesterday, this was from a story on Saturday, Governor DeSantis was asked about the possible passage of constitutional carry in 2023, especially since there is now a massive Republican supermajority in control of the legislature. The governor had this to say: well, we've had a majority this whole time. I'll let Paul answer that because I'm ready. And he's looking over then to incoming House Speaker Paul Renner. Are you going to do it? Paul Renner responded with a yes. Once again, Florida and Nebraska are both racing neck and neck to boldly go where 25 other states have gone before.
Right.
So, I don't know. Will it happen? It could happen in either state. I'm so tired of holding my breath. I passed out 2 years in a row waiting for Florida to do it. I'm not. Well, my crystal ball's broke. Rob, what do you think?
And this is where being clever can cost you later. So this is a incoming Speaker of the House, different than the old one, but still part of the Florida executive team in their legislature. And I thought the problems with getting gun control passed were in the Florida Senate. So it takes two halves to tango. Yeah, this is where behind the scenes, someone's got to say, Senator, about that bill you'd like to get passed. This is where we deal.
Yes.
We'll see what it's worth.
And fortunately, in Nebraska, you don't have that problem.
Right.
Because it's a unicameral legislature. And from what I understand, their new governor has said that he would sign it, and he's pushing. The guy who was objecting to it before didn't run for re-election. The previous governor was certainly in support of it. So
yeah, they were three votes shy. Nebraska was 3 votes shy last year, and they're all of a sudden they've got 3 more conservatives in the legislature this year. So, we'll see. And we've got, we're looking down the pipe at 3 weeks, and new legislatures start. So, going to have lots of news to talk about come the first of the year. Rob, you want to go ahead and take our next story, man?
Sure. Nice to bring some good news, and we have a win in Oregon. A judge handed us a victory Thursday and placed the new voter-approved ban on high-capacity magazines on hold, at least until the court case is completely decided. Judge Robert Riccio released the written ruling after a lengthy court hearing earlier this week. As you can imagine, attorneys for gun rights groups and for gun control groups argued back and forth. This was on whether the constitutional amendment that restricted magazines to 10 rounds was constitutional. Quote, that the large capacity magazine bans promote public safety is mere speculation. The court cannot sustain restraint on constitutional rights on mere speculation that the restriction could promote public safety, close quote. My gosh, that sounds like a judge. John, what do you think?
Well, I'm saying thank goodness for state judges, because in this same situation, when it was brought before the federal judge in federal district court, she said that she gave a temporary restraining order against part of the bill, the law, but not magazines, because she said magazines were not covered by the Second Amendment. Bearing in mind that a magazine is an integral part of any firearm that uses magazines. So,
yeah,
right.
I mean, if you can say, I was going to say, if you can say it is a restraint against the Second Amendment to outlaw gun ranges, it just doesn't make sense that something is even closer to the firearm is not part of the Second Amendment.
I mean, if you can't have magazines, you go, well, are we allowed ammunition?
Yeah, and
come on, Judge.
And that's a great. I mean, the Ezell decision and the McDonald decision out of Chicago were exactly that. They would not allow ranges in the city of Chicago, and they got struck down by the Supreme Court on Second Amendment grounds. So you would think that certainly a magazine, which is much more integral to north of 95% of the firearms out there today, would be a restriction that is, again, beyond the.
I'm going to go one step further. A few years ago, Joe Huffman, who's a blogger out in Washington State, did a demonstration showing how quickly you can change a magazine and how he could get 30 or 40 shots off, and the difference between 10-round magazines, 7-round magazines, and two 15-round magazines was minimal. You can restrict a restriction on a magazine does not restrict how many rounds an evil killer can put out and aim at the public. He just has to carry more magazines.
Well, Charlie, go.
That is exactly what happens here in occupied territory. They put the magazine restriction and say you can only have 10 rounds in magazines made after September 13th, 1994, but they don't restrict how many magazines you can carry. And with a little bit of practice time, you can change magazines pretty quickly. One defensive course, maybe 2 defensive courses will teach you how to change them and change them quickly. And with some practice, it becomes a breeze. It becomes something you don't have to look at when you're doing. And boggles my mind that this is still an issue in a lot of states.
Well, and keep in mind that that 10 round, 7 round, whatever magazines are more concealable. So are they pushing us to more concealable weapons?
I like that.
I gotta get I gotta get a couple comments in here. Going back to the Mogan David, John Adine, hey Doc, athlete foot aids the fermentation. So wow.
So says the doctor. It's official.
Yes. Couple more comments here. First, 500 Magnum from several minutes ago. R.I.P. to everyone affected by the tragedy in Canada, and my condolences to the families. Yeah, that's not in our news segment tonight, but yes, absolutely. I just, being a bit of a jerk here, I'm going to say, how can this happen in Canada? They've outlawed almost all firearms. And I'm sure Canada has the same, murder's illegal up there too. So yeah, I just don't understand how it could happen. But he also 500 Magnum. This one just a minute ago. How long until gun control becomes toxic to politicians? 10 years, 20 years? Right now, it depends on your area. Right now in South Dakota, that is absolutely the third rail. Do not touch gun control, or you will be gone. And that's even if you're a liberal member of the state house. So in California, that's not quite the case. So all right, let's see where I got a next story.
Shall I take us to Chicago?
Yeah, let's do that.
From Friday evening to Monday morning, gun-controlled Chicago had 22 people shot and wounded. That doesn't count the 14-year-old and 15-year-old brothers who were murdered in front of their school on... Are we okay? Who were murdered in front of their school on Friday. That makes a total of 46 people shot in the last week. The total is now over 3,500 people shot this year. They're shot by the drug gangs who control Chicago. Put that in perspective. A person is shot in Chicago every 2.5 hours. I wish that Chicago were our only failed, corrupt city. Baltimore had 1 person shot to death last week. Like Chicago, both numbers are down from the previous week. In Baltimore, that brings the total up to 281 people shot and killed. We have to mention these examples because both cities advertise their extremely strict gun control laws. And if mountains of ink on paper would make us safer, I apologize, that was a Freudian slip. Those cities should be paradise. That doesn't work because it takes more than bad laws and press releases to actually stop violent criminals. What the big city media don't tell us is that we're not all the same. Each year, most counties in the United States won't have a single murder. Not with a gun, with a club, none of any kind. Violence is localized. More than half of our murders come from less than 2% of our counties. Our murders are from our failed cities and indirectly from the politicians who killed them with bad laws. Those politicians say the violence in their cities, it's not really their fault. They blame the guns that come from other places where there isn't crime. Good governance, a good economy, and a functioning justice system drastically reduce crime for most of us. Obviously not for Chicago and for Baltimore. I bring those statistics up, even though they embarrass Democrats, because I'm lucky to be able to do so. It seems that Democrat apparatchiks and gun control functionaries want us disarmed, and they're able to have the statistics changed in reports about armed defense that were collected by the U.S. Center for Disease Control. To me, this is reminiscent of the Soviet Union, where when people went out of favor as regimes changed, they were erased from photographs. Those distorted reports may be another reason not to allow the CDC to publish research on armed defense. Now, these statistical questions, and John, I hope you'll chime in here, aren't as simple as they sound. How many adults used a gun in self-defense last year? Well, what if you didn't use your gun during the defense, but instead used someone else's gun to save your life? Happens all the time. Should that count too? What if you're a 20-year-old and you grab the family shotgun? Well, you're not considered an adult in many states who's old enough to own a firearm. Should they be counted? Each question produces a different number of armed offenses. John, talk to me.
Well, people just need to go through some of the DGUs we have presented over the years, where the person defends themselves by taking the firearm away from the thug, the criminal, the assaulter. So yes, they don't have a gun, but they obtain a firearm from their attacker. But does that count? That's why we do say POGO, pants on, gun on.
Yep.
I also, we've talked about Chicago, we've talked about Baltimore. Let's talk about St. Louis. It's still violent, but a couple years ago, it was the murder capital of the U.S. Given I have relatives out there, it impacts me personally. However, it is no longer the murder capital. The state of Missouri does have constitutional carry now. Neither Maryland, certainly not, nor Illinois does. The mitigating factor for violence, I think, in St. Louis is you have a SARS-appointed, a SARS-elected prosecutor still in charge.
Yep. And let me dovetail off that. Charlie, go, and then I'm going to take us in a whole different direction.
Just real quick, if in some states, if the victim takes the gun from the criminal, that would be an illegal transfer, correct?
Yes. Yes, it would.
Right.
I want to be on that jury.
Right. So what I want to say is if the CDC, how are the CDC's stats going to look if there are no firearms, but the violent rate rises and rises and rises because the innocent people can't protect themselves?
Well, and it will. Just look at England.
Charlie, I think what the CDC will do is roll over to political pressure and list the criminals who use guns, but just like the media, they'll deny that honest citizens use them for self-defense.
Well, sure, if you take them away from all the law-abiding people who could protect themselves, they're not going to be able to use them for self-defense.
That's what they want, yeah.
Well, and I want to bring up a story that I was going to cover today on the bullet, but we just did not have time to get to. This is off WRDO.com. I'm just going to read some from the beginning of the article. It's going to sound bad, but it gets better as we go. Several Chicago aldermen are fed up with violence and say it's time to crack down on illegal guns. This week, the city council passed an ordinance allowing police to impose fines and jail time on people caught with an illegal gun, regardless of what happens in court. But as CBS 2's Charlie DeMar reported Friday night, not everyone is on board. Supporters of the ordinance say something needs to be done to try to reduce violent crime and argue that this is simply a tool for officers, but critics say it's nothing more than political posturing and will further erode trust between the community and criminal justice system. Here, we're getting to the good part here in just a minute. A total of 12,000 illegal guns were taken off Chicago streets in 2021. Now, the new ordinance will allow police officers to write a ticket that would impose fines and jail time to those caught with an illegal gun. We've got to try something else, said Alderman Matt O'Shea, because the Cook County State's Attorney's Office is failing us. Alderman O'Shea supported the ordinance, which passed the City Council this week. He's critical of Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox and what he calls Fox's failure to punish offenders properly. Quite frankly, he said, if our judicial partners aren't going to do their job, then we're going to have to look to add a tool for law enforcement to have, O'Shea said. I think he's dangerously close to getting this right, guys. I think he's dangerously close in that it's bad actors that are causing crime in Chicago, and letting them and booking them in the morning, have them out by lunchtime is the problem. You're not locking up the bad actors. And I think Alderman O'Shea is just this far away from getting that.
You know, I'd like to say about the story, the guns themselves are not illegal. It is the owners that are illegal. They are illegal. They are not illegal guns. They are illegally owned guns. You have prohibited people.
Illegally possessed, because, well, I guess if you steal something, do you really own it?
Possession is 9/10 of the law?
Yeah.
That's right. Possession is 9/10 of the law, correct. We could go with this, back to it's an illegal transfer if you take it from someone that's not yours.
Yeah.
So they fill out a 4473?
Right.
Well, was it possession or transfer of ownership? And that's what Soros wanted to, and Bloomberg wanted to confuse all those years ago too. If I hand you the gun at the range, say, do you want to shoot it? Is that temporary possession, or did ownership change?
Yeah.
Where are we headed next?
Logically, this would be. It would be. What was the first one you said? Temporary ownership?
Temporary possession?
Temporary possession. Temporary possession.
Right.
And it's, I don't know, it's not even possession, right? Because it's not yours. Like if you go to the grocery store, you put all that food in the shopping cart, it's not yours until you pay for it.
On the other hand, the problem I have with with the world's largest retailer, I'll just leave it at that,
right,
is quite often if I go shop there, they will want to see my receipt and look through my cart on the way out. I'll show them a receipt as I'm walking by. Once I paid for it, it's legally mine. And you want to search me, you'd better have a badge and a reason. So I hold the receipt like this as I'm walking away.
I think they would argue that ownership doesn't transfer until you leave the store.
They can argue it all they want.
Yeah, but in the bathrooms, the signs say you can't bring anything in that belongs to the store.
You haven't paid for it yet.
Right, you haven't paid for it, it still belongs to the store, but you possess it. Not that you want to take things into the bathroom. Oh my gosh.
Oh, where is an attorney when you really need one? Right. Yeah. All right. Where are we going next, guys? Because I scrolled way down to grab that
Providence,
link.
Or do we want to go to Rhode Island or to California?
Let's talk Rhode Island, because that one let's talk Rhode Island.
Yeah, Rhode Island actually fits it back in with what we were talking about with Oregon.
Right.
This is from Providence. As the deadline approaches for gun owners to give up their high-capacity firearms magazines or face legal consequences, a federal judge on Wednesday upheld a newly enacted state law banning magazines that carry more than 10 rounds of ammunition. U.S. District Court Judge John McConnell, Jr. refused to grant a request by Chepachet gun store and several Rhode Island gun owners for a preliminary injunction blocking a law which on Sunday will make possession of a large-capacity gun magazine a felony in Rhode Island. McConnell found that the plaintiffs, Big Bear Hunting and Fishing Supply, 3 Rhode Island residents, Mary Brimmer, James Grundy, and Jonathan Hurons, and a Newport homeowner who lives in Florida, Jeffrey Goyette, had not shown they would suffer irreparable harm if the law was allowed to take effect, and that allowing its enforcement was in the public's interest.
Well, and here we get we need to go again to the Bruin decision. where Judge Thomas wrote, interest balancing is not allowed. And
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever this is going to be struck down on appeal, whether it be in the Rhode Island is second, first. Okay. Whether it be in the first district court of appeals or if it gets to the Supreme Court, because believe me, SAF will take it there. It's going to be struck down. It's just how long. Charlie, you're up in there in show notes for a comment.
So suffering irreparable harm could be fatal for these people if they have. I always tell people they should get an old Glock and a pre-94 high cap magazine, so that they can have a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds here in the Commonwealth. And I always say the reason that you want these is bad guys have friends. So when 3 guys come in your house and you've got the Joe Biden special, the double barrel shotgun, and you fire the blast into the air, you have 3 guys in one shot to stop bad guys from doing irreparable harm to you and your family. And then, of course, it would be too late to sue everyone, to sue the state of Rhode Island posthumously. This is ridiculous stuff.
John, you're up next for a comment in show notes.
Yeah, I would urge our listeners to go to YouTube and search for, quote, Joe Huffman Magazine. And you can see the YouTube I referenced earlier on magazine capacity and how quickly you can change magazines. It was done by Joe 11 years ago, but it's still every bit as valid today as it was when it was made.
Oh, yeah.
I've got to say, with a little bit of practice, I have been able to drop a magazine, reholster, put in a new magazine, and continue shooting while I play the trumpet in, I'm going to say, well under less than 2 seconds.
Oh, yeah. Because you don't slow down your pace that I've ever seen. Unless it's some fantastic editing. You don't slow down your pace of playing. And you're a good trumpet player, but editor, so,
not so much. The very first gungram I did, before I even called them gungrams, I did the Blue Danube Waltz, and I was in the middle of bum ba da 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 bang 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 bang, magazine holster magazine, bring it up right while I was playing, and it was about that fast.
And you've gained in skills since then, I'm guessing.
Hopefully.
Yeah, too bad you can't use a Glock 18 magazine. It'd make your life so much easier.
I actually thought about this before. If I had access to one with a 33 round stick magazine, I've thought about doing that. Oh my gosh, what's that surfer tune from Pulp Fiction?
Wipeout.
No, not Wipeout. But it's some other surf music that's really that we would all recognize if we heard it.
You got to be able to play trumpet that fast, though, dude.
I could flutter tongue. I've thought about it.
All right, Charlie, you want to talk about Saint Benitez?
Absolutely. We had a huge win in California. A federal judge issued a tentative ruling Friday that blocks half of the California gun bill that state legislators, at the behest of Governor Gavin Newsom, modeled after the controversial Texas law allowing private citizens to sue abortion providers. The part of the bill, signed by Newsom in July and set to take effect on January 1st, being challenged was a fee-shifting proposition that would make it extremely financially risky to bring any lawsuit fighting California's strict gun laws. Just as Texas lawmakers have used the provision to shield their abortion law from legal challenges, the California provision made it so any individual or group challenging a Second Amendment regulation would have to win each and every one of their claims, or else pay the government's legal fees. U.S. District Judge Roger Benitez called such fee-shifting provisions abhorrent. He issued a tentative oral ruling citing with the gun rights groups challenging the provision to 2 separate lawsuits. He said he'll formalize his tentative ruling when, with a written order issuing an injunction that bars the enactment of California's fee-shifting provision.
Yeah, let me get the... Dana just got this comment in. A law so bad the AG won't defend it. Yeah, the Bob Bonta, the California Attorney General, withdrew from this case because he said, look, this is just a mirror of the Texas abortion law that I said was unconstitutional. Therefore, there's no way I could in good faith defend this law and say it's constitutional, because then I would be defending the abortion law that I said was unconstitutional. So, and Carrie Ann Alclair says, what bothers me is the media is already making us the bad guy by discussing firearms restrictions. Why are they not looking at the crime? From my standpoint...
Because that makes the politicians look bad. Yeah.
From my standpoint, if it doesn't promote their political view, they're gonna. Are we slanted here on Polite Society Podcast? Yes, we are. I am absolutely slanted towards freedom, but they are just as slanted in the mainstream media. And if it doesn't promote what they think, they won't run with it.
I mean, this is just like what happened in New Jersey a couple weeks ago, when the guy said, "Well, these laws aren't for the criminals; these are for the gun owners."
Yeah. Let me.
Can I quote the judge here for a minute?
Yes, do it. Go, Rob.
People feel that they can't go to the courts if that process is taken away from them. What's left? The result is either civil disobedience or violence. Using the strong arm of the state with its unlimited resources to discourage people from trying to fight for their rights in court is wrong. I can't think of anything more tyrannical. That was Judge Benitez.
Absolutely. Let me get a couple comments in here. Roderick, over on the Facebook side, says the 30-round 5.56 magazine that came with my AR only holds 10 rounds of 458 SOCOM rounds. This would be politically correct. They're going against they're discriminating against the skinny rounds. That's absolutely right, Roderick. They're discriminating against the tiny rounds. So yeah, absolutely. That's a 458 SOCOM mag. I'm right there with you, bud. And one more, this one from the YouTube side, 500 Magnum. The fact that Gavin Newsom and all the other constitutional breakers aren't in prison for breaking their oath to office is absolutely ridiculous. Yes, but legally, the legal system is so screwed up that there's not much. That's not very realistic going forward, at least short term. So, all right, guys. Let's see here. Oh, hey, I think I'm going to take the next one. Oh, wait a minute, it got moved.
Which one is that?
I wanted to talk about Florida. Yeah, I don't know where it went.
There it is. It's back.
It's back. Okay. Now I got to scroll to find it again. Give me a second here. Now I'm too far back. I'll get there. Really, I will. Washington Post had a story on Friday that actually this was a Saturday story. It was written as in, oh my God, can you believe they're doing this? In the woods off of Southwest Florida Highway, a Republican business executive has built an entertainment complex to bring together light-minded conservatives for everything from speeches by far-right leaders to family barbecues. A concrete highway leads visitors through a black painted hallway filled with quotes from the founding fathers such as Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin. A reception hall is lined with a wall-sized copy of the Bill of Rights. A shooting range adjoins the facility, and a large sign reminds visitors of their Second Amendment rights. There are also inflatable water slides, a gazebo, and picnic benches for kids. Yeah, this is obviously for people who believe in freedom, believe in their rights. If people want to give up their rights, if they don't want freedom of their speech, if they don't want to arm themselves, there's a place for them in Florida too. It's called Disneyland.
Amen. I don't think they're. I assume that their demographic are like-minded conservatives, but I think if a liberal Democrat wanted to come in, I'm sure they would still take their money and let them enjoy the barbecues, inflatable water slides, and picnic benches for kids.
Yes, I'm sure they'd be welcome. I'm just as sure that they would not be politically silenced while they're there. There would be good, if they were to air their political opinion, there'd be robust conversation, but I don't think they'd be automatically shut down. So
no.
Let me see here. Yeah, let's go ahead and we've only got a couple stories left. We're way late, but let's push on. Let's get through news, and then we'll take a break. We do have temporary laws, this one in New York. New York's new gun law remains intact, at least temporarily, after a federal appeals court on Monday paused a lower court's ruling blocking a key section of the law that bans firearms in parks, public transit systems, and on private property without the property owner's permission. The stay by a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit is the third such order issued this month by the panel as it considers constitutional challenges to the New York legislation. Now, this is not a full-time permanent loss. The Second Circuit still has to listen to legal arguments and rule, and should this not, and this is a joint GOA and SAF case, should this not go our way, the ink will not be dry before it gets pushed on to the Supreme Court, or at least the file will be pushed to the Supreme Court, and we'll ask them for cert or certiorari. So
the private property thing gets me. So they talk about this in New Jersey as well. If you are going to allow this new law proposes, if you're going to allow people to carry a firearm on your property, then you have to put up a sign. What if the sign said something like, "We've got guns here, we're cool with it, if you step on our property, we'll shoot you"? I assume the anti-crowd would get upset by that sign. However, it perfectly lays out that the private property owner is a firearm owner and often, or possibly, a firearm user. This is one of the things with me, like, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, you have to put up a sign, and then if you put up a sign that says, step on the property will kill you, they're not going to be happy with that either. So I think it really comes down to they're just not going to be happy.
One of my favorite signs like that is, if you can read this sign, you're in range, with a picture of it, of a scoped rifle. Yeah.
I've seen one that says, you might be out of sight, but you're not out of range.
Down here they say, firearms welcome. If necessary, judicious marksmanship is appreciated.
Nice.
You don't draw yours, I won't draw mine.
That was the cop I saw the other day, right?
Yeah. All right, we got one more story. No, do we have one or two more stories?
One.
Okay. John, you want to take that one?
Yeah, this is about a misleading headline, but actually good news in Ohio. The headline from the Cleveland Plain-Dealer reads, "Ban on gun sales during a riot. Tougher penalties for impeding police pass Ohio General Assembly." Now, here are the first two paragraphs of the story. Police would be banned from stopping guns from being sold or carried in areas where a riot is happening or might take place under legislation passed early Thursday morning during a marathon session by Ohio State lawmakers. Senate Bill 16, which now goes to Governor Mike DeWine's desk, also would declare gun stores, quote, an essential business that cannot be shut down by the state during a declaration of emergency. I'm going to be the first to comment on this because this is the first case that the Second Amendment Foundation brought after the win in the McDonald case was Bateman versus Purdue. Under existing North Carolina law at that time, if a state of emergency was declared, you could not carry a firearm outside the home with or without a permit. Gun stores were not allowed to be open, nor liquor stores. Liquor sales, or all alcohol sales, I should say, were forbidden. Now, a statewide state of emergency could be you have a hurricane down in Nags Head, whereas in Murphy, the sun is shining. But it would apply equally, whether you were in Nags Head or 500 miles to the west in Murphy. And that is what the Second Amendment Foundation fought. Alan Gurr was the attorney on the case. It was a win. The state lost, and they decided that they were not going to appeal. And later the state legislature did clarify the law that said legally owned firearms can be used for self-protection during periods of an emergency. So,
Charlie, you're up next,
Charlie?
dude.
Yeah, I think we found out in 2020 that people without firearms wanted to buy them during riot season. They very much wanted to buy new guns and take some training and learn how to use them, and they really wanted to do that in 2020. So riots are a great time for people to buy guns.
Well, and
they
let's
wanted to make sure that the riots were mostly peaceful.
yes,
exactly.
and let's if there is a riot that is across town looking like it's moving, and you want a gun, the rioters aren't going to be going to the gun store and purchasing and going through a 4473 background check.
Right.
The rioters are going to break into the firearm store and steal them.
Right, which leads back to the illegal transfer.
Yes.
Or rooftop Koreans.
Yeah, This is a good law, but that headline, that just ban on gun sales during a riot, tougher penalties for impeding police officer pass Ohio General Assembly. That's clearly the misleading. If you were scanning headlines like I occasionally do, and that's how I came across this one, I was just scanning headlines and and then I looked at it and that's actually good news. So
all the propaganda that's fit to print.
There you go. All right, that is going to be the end of our news segment. We're going to take our break, and when we come back, we're going to get to our DGU segment. I promise we're going to be out of here in under 90 minutes tonight, so hang on. We're going to be right back right after we hear from the Complete Combatant. Right back after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by The Complete Combatant. The Complete Combatant is designed for a broad base of citizens that range from students that don't own a gun on up to advanced students that train often. The Complete Combatant offers several different courses that build upon each other, from avoidance, using verbal commands, and preparing for contact, lethal versus non-lethal decisions, your 911 call, interacting with the police, to even dealing with the legal system in the aftermath. The Complete Combatant courses are a layered approach for all levels of experience that will walk you through all the many stages of decisions while developing a game plan tailored to your skills and your everyday carry. please visit www.thecompletecombatant.com and make sure you mention this ad to receive 15% off. Again, that's www.thecompletecombatant.com and mention the ad for 15% off.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Defensive Gun Use segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Let me get a couple comments in here real quick. Dana says, as soon as I get the right button here, that's the one there. Riot season, Charlie, like deer season?
Exactly.
Is that like pork
we have our right? As long as it's not thigh rub, that'll be fine.
Yeah. And then one more by Michael DeWine, not the governor of Ohio, but a different Michael DeWine. One of my favorites. I'm only a threat if you are an immediate and unavoidable threat to me. There you go. There you go. So let's get into our defensive gun use segment. These discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are trainers, but this is not formal training, and you need formal training. As always, the opinions of the hosts are only their own opinions and not those of any sponsors or other affiliations. Rob, I see you working down in the first DGU. You want to take that one, bud?
May I?
Yeah, absolutely.
This happened in Chandler, Arizona at 9:30 a.m. A 29-year-old man arrived at an Amazon fulfillment center. He was not working at the center, either as an employee or a contract worker. According to initial reports, he did know two of the men who worked there. On Friday, it was reported that he went to the facility because he was jealous in a love triangle. His girlfriend wasn't working that day, so he planned on confronting a worker who he only knew by name. The man asked an employee in the parking lot if he knew that worker who was paying attention to his girlfriend. And the worker said, "Nah, something's not right." He asked the guy to leave the parking lot. At that point, the intruder shot the employee in the parking lot several times. A third man who was nearby drew his own gun and fired at the attacker. In all, 10 rounds were fired. First responders found the attacker in the parking lot. He was quickly succumbing to his wounds. The man who he shot was taken to the hospital, unfortunately with life-threatening injuries. The good news is he was reported at least in stable condition. According to Sergeant McInnes with the Chandler Police, the incident wasn't an active shooter event, and the defender wasn't targeting, the attacker wasn't targeting Amazon employees in general. Instead, it was personal issues between the three lovers who led to violence. Both Amazon corporate and the defender are cooperating with the investigation. The defender isn't considered a suspect since he protected the second man. Another contract worker working at the site characterized the man who was shot as a veteran who would stand up. Another contract worker characterized the man who was wounded as a veteran who would stand up for them in any situation. And the defender is a big cigar fan and that he, the employee, needed to get the defender some fine cigars. This is a pickup location for the Amazon Flex drivers to pick up deliveries for the same or next day delivery. Operations were shut down and workers were sent home for the day. John, what do you see here?
I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, for the personal safety of the worker who got shot, by telling the guy, "You need to leave," might have said to himself, "I don't know John Doe here you're talking about, but let me go. You wait here. I'll go inside and see if somebody knows him and send him out so you can find him. And in the meantime, when you go inside, you call the cops and say, we have somebody out here that's threatening one of our employees. Could you come and take care of it?"
Right. Now,
And it's nothing about the
if-
third guy who shot him. I'm just saying he might have weaseled his way out of it without getting shot.
Also, and I talk about this every week. If at home, I expect you to have a personal security plan. What do you do? What does your family do so that you're not there flat-footed? How about at work? John has a wonderful idea. Doesn't help us if you're the only guy who knows it. How about bringing it up with your boss and sharing it with your coworkers? Doesn't cost a dime.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, I want to mention that we have now 2 Amazon facilities in Sioux Falls. We have a facility like this one where flex drivers come in and get deliveries, and we also have a fulfillment center. And both of those facilities have large signs saying no firearms allowed here. I'm only hoping the good guy with a gun did not lose his job over this.
Yeah.
Hopefully he gets a pay raise too.
I'm telling you. I am telling you. Charlie, let's go to Rome, Georgia.
All right, in Rome, Georgia, in October, Benjamin Cox Jr., 27 years old, was moving his estranged wife's belongings out of their home. He was carrying those items outside, and his estranged wife and her 42-year-old father were collecting them. At some point, words were exchanged between Cox and his father-in-law. Video evidence from the home shows Cox retreating into his home to avoid the confrontation with a much larger father-in-law. The man could be seen following him into the home. On audio, he can be heard several times telling the trespasser to leave, then he produces a pistol. Cox shot the older man and became aggressive as he entered the home. The wife's father was pronounced dead at the scene. The Rome Circuit District Attorney Office dropped charges this week. Rome's police department detectives in the case had probable cause to arrest this defendant on October 7, 2022. They continue to work the case along with staff in my office. Evidence developed that pointed to Mr. Benjamin Cox having valid justification defense under several statutes, including self-defense, defense of habitation, and the stand your ground statute. Although, quote, although a thorough review of the evidence, including the applicable statutes, is pending, charges may have been dismissed against Mr. Cox, the Attorney General said. The District Attorney said.
Yeah, it looks like the guy was in the process of moving out, but yeah, if you go after somebody in the house they're residing in, that's kind of clear cut.
It sounds like he was moving his wife's belongings out. He was the occupant. And would have remained the occupant.
That's what I missed. Okay, so he was going to continue living there. The wife was moving out. He was helping her move her stuff out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And whether helping her just meant throwing her on the front lawn,
That sounds like that didn't happen, but right.
Yeah.
Sounds like he was doing it. It was fairly decent. I'm helping you move as opposed to take your crap and get gone.
Right, I'm throwing it out on the lawn. Come get it.
Yeah. Well, there may have been or may not have been relationships before I married my sweetheart where there were belongings that ended up in the yard, and it's something I may or may not be familiar with. But
however they started, they did not end well.
Yes, absolutely. Let me go over and see if we got comments. We're clear on this, so let's do this. Let's.
How old the ex-wife was?
Well, the
daddy's only 42.
Yeah, I wondered that too. If the father's 42, and let's say he starts young, how old's his daughter going to be?
Let's say he starts at 16. That means 30s.
She could be in her early. I can't do
Late
math that
20s.
fast.
Yeah, and in 20s. Yeah, excuse
Okay.
me. Yeah, early to mid 20s.
Right, and the guy was 27 years old too. So there's a 15, 16-year difference there.
Possibly.
Right.
All right, let's do this.
It
Let's
is
go
the
ahead
South after all.
let's go ahead and
was
take
that?
our. I'm sorry.
It's the South. I met a client once who was 36 and just became a grandmother.
That's
Whoa.
a little on the young side. Yeah. Let's go ahead and step aside to our final break. When we come back, we're going to let everybody know what we've been doing in media, and we'll shut the show down. Hang on, everybody. Right back, right after we hear from JPFO, right after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. JPFO.org.
Welcome back to the final segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Rob, I think you've been above water all this week, so you must have written some at Slowfax.
I tried writing underwater. It's way harder.
Those laptops just don't last as well.
Just right. Brutal gangs now control 60% of the capital of Haiti. Competing gangs are kidnapping, raping, and killing at will. The gangs have no fear and no mercy. As murderous gangs take over Port-au-Prince, the world is getting a brutal reminder of why honest citizens need access to firearms for self-defense. Haitians are in this situation because their government made it difficult, if not impossible, for the honest citizens to exercise their natural right of self-defense. You and I hear that news. It's too easy to think that it happened there and it couldn't happen here. Au contraire. We've already seen this level of crime here in the United States. Let me remind you, we saw extensive riots in Baltimore with several hundred buildings damaged, including 27 drugstores looted, hundreds of thousands of doses of narcotics released to the public. We've seen the takeover of several square blocks in downtown Seattle, where there were also riots and rapes. We saw nightly riots in Portland for most of a year. Here's the formula. Take your civilized town and add a progressive Democrat mayor. Add a Soros-funded district attorney and some Bloomberg-funded anti-gun laws. I list many more examples and the solutions. The article is called, Yes, We've Seen Riots Here Too. My articles are up at Clash Daily, at AmmoLand, and at my blog, slowfax.wordpress.com. John, you've been busy at your blog, No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money.
Well, the state treasurer of North Carolina, Dale Folwell, is calling for the resignation or removal of Larry Fink as CEO of BlackRock. For those that don't know, BlackRock is one of the world's largest asset managers, and Fink is using that to push a whole handful of liberal social policies on companies. Folwell is angered about Fink's climate change, carbon neutral stance, and is probably going to try to remove somewhere around $14 billion of assets that is managed by BlackRock. But we as Goners should also be aware of Fink's efforts to make companies like Ruger and Smith & Wesson to adopt smart guns and other gun control measures. And I spoke out about this what I call corporate virtue signaling by BlackRock in the past, But my former company made me remove that post. They said to me, "We do a lot of business with BlackRock, and we really don't want that post to remain up." Fortunately, I am now retired, and I am free to speak about the dangers of it. That and more is at onlygunsandmoney.com. Passing it to you, Charlie.
All right. Well, I will be doing a live show on YouTube with Matt Mallory this Wednesday. He and I have been doing live shows for a good chunk of 2022. And this week on Wednesday is going to be the Ugly Sweater Christmas Party. We've got a number of our media folks dropping by to the online party. And I made a little flyer for it, and I put the Ugly Christmas Sweater Party. And he's like, "It's not the Ugly Christmas Sweater Party." And I said, "I thought it was the Ugly Christmas Sweater Party." He said, "It's the Ugly Sweater Christmas Party." So it's all gets confusing depending on how you say this. Anyway, so people can tune into this on the Riding Shotgun with Charlie YouTube channel at 8 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday. And my kids are back in town from college, and I've got to figure out what tune we're going to do for the Cook family Christmas Gungram this year. So trying to keep busy.
Just please don't make it a Mariah Carey tune, please.
So in 2020, I said, "All right, kids, 2020 was a bad year. We're going to either do the Paul McCartney song, the George Michael song, or the Mariah Carey song." And we ended up doing the Paul McCartney song. So, yeah, I have no intention of doing Mariah Carey.
All right. On my end, I would like to encourage everybody to come join me 5 p.m. Central Time all this week for the Bullet. There will be no weekend Bullet because Saturday is Christmas Eve, and past experience has taught me if you have a live stream on Christmas Eve, you are going to be the only one there.
You're talking to yourself, yeah.
Yes. So no Saturday show this week. Same thing for New Year's Eve, because on New Year's Eve, I think there may be 1 or 2 people there, but they'll probably be in the process of getting lit up. So no Christmas Eve show, no New Year's Eve show, but I will have Monday through Friday shows this week, and next Saturday shows return the 7th of January. So do come join me for those. On our way out, I want to remind everybody to join our Facebook listeners group. If you are a member of Facebook, just search the Book of Face for Polite Society podcast listeners. And I got to admit, I haven't been there in a couple of weeks, but I need to get back in there. I need to be doing some posting. And but it's a place where I want to say there's like 100 members of just listeners to the show. You're not going to find, it's moderated. You're not going to find any anti-gun rhetoric in there. It's all safe for us. So that does wrap up another episode of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. So for Amy, Tracy, John, Susan, Amanda, Robin, Charlie, and Rob.
Until next time.
Stay safe.
Be aware.
And we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.
All right, we are clear of the recording. I want to get this comment in very fast. 500 Magnum. This is an absolute truth. Registration always leads to confiscation. The day we give up our guns is the day our country dies, and we die with it. Registration always leads to well, let me say this. There's one time in history that registration has not yet led to confiscation. That's Canada. We will see where that goes.
Evan Knappen likes to say that legislation leads to registration, registration leads to confiscation, and confiscation leads to extermination.
Yes, I would agree with that. So Canada did have a registration for a very long time. Their federal courts, or their judicial system, made them take it down, and Quebec fought that kicking and screaming. I kind of lost track of where that went, but now there's new rounds of that's now illegal and you got to turn it in, and which is why this week's tragedy just baffles me, because guess what? The guns, you can't uninvent the gun. They will always be around. So I'm going to go ahead and shut the streams down, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining in and commenting. And we will see you